Hi folks, this is your Professor Stan Wanglund. I just came in from the gym and what does that have to do with anything? But I thought I'd make a little quick video for you with just some ideas that I had regarding Module 2 and the question, and also Module 3. You know, we're talking about individual education plans, who can be educated, who isn't, the least restrictive environment, all of those kinds of things. You know, and I think I had a nice little video there, and the textbook is very clear. But there's so many things from the field. That means in actual practice and working with people who are disabled that are really important as you're doing the questions. Obviously, you're learning how to be critical thinkers. Some of you may think you're advanced in that. You might be. You know, but on the other hand, these are questions that don't have a right or wrong answer, but they're designed to get you thinking along the big picture. In many areas. So for example, the question this week on from chapter 2, who can learn and who can't, and what are some barriers to perhaps education? That's a pretty big topic, and what I'm really looking for is your ability to write clearly, to organize whatever thoughts you have clearly, and have supporting information, information that you find from expert sources, not just Wikipedia or WebMD. Those aren't the best sources. You can go to the National Institute of Health. You can go to PubMed. You can just use a variety of things. The CDC, different universities, the Mayo Clinic. You know, have several of those things. But let's take this one. For question 2 here: who can learn and who can't? Obviously, everybody has opinions on that, and not everybody's a psychologist or a special educator, and you shouldn't be expected to be that. So many times you'll have common sense kinds of things. Well, everybody has different skills. If you teach them with love, if you're patient and kind, so on and so forth. All of those things sound good and have an element of truth to them, but they really don't address the big picture and, who can learn and what is learning. So that might be a good place to start when you're doing your research for a question. Say, what are some learning theories? I know when I was a young guy in the field of psychology, I started working with disabled people, and the approach then, as it pretty much is today, was with applied behavioral analysis. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I was never drawn to that. But the claims with that are pretty bold, that all behavior can be modified, that all behavior can be learned, and all behavior can be extinguished. Well, I can tell you with great certainty, and show you the research on that applied behavior analysis in many cases brings about many changes in people, but there's no guarantee that all behavior can be modified, and there's no guarantee that you can extinguish every behavior, because I've been chief of service, treatment team leader, attending psychologist, supervising psychologist to people who were profoundly and severely disabled or had very, very exceptional behaviors. And let me tell you, all the experts in the world were working with them on these kinds of in these kinds of manners, with all the variables controlled, and in many cases very little change, if any, was made. So who can learn and who can't? The big picture is to stop talking about just people who have a mild intellectual disability, is what you might see in special education, people with learning disabilities, people who have mild autism or on the spectrum, and or that terrible term high functioning, people of attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, those kinds of things. Well, there's a number of people like that. Those individuals in many cases resemble the quote-unquote normal population, the average population. And there is a term of normal, and it relates to measures of central tendency, things on the bell-shaped curve. How are most people? They pretty much fall into these categories. So, those kind of conditions, in many cases, cosmetically, the people in many ways look like you and I. But if you look at learning theories, the different theories, and you can check, you can do a search on those yourself. What about populations where people only have a brainstem? I was in charge of residential units and institutions where people could basically only breathe. And it was very difficult just to maintain their body temperature. So my goodness gracious, what were they capable of learning? Now, to be a critical thinker, what were they capable of learning in some cases? Some people just to smile, or some people just to touch your hand and let you know that they had a specific need or a want and were aware of it. Some small volitional or type of behavior or a behavior where they made a choice. So we call those micromolecular behaviors, very, very tiny behaviors. Functional skills with many people, people who couldn't learn things academically like you or I because they had brain damage, for lack of a better term. Their central nervous systems, their brain and spinal cords were dysfunctional. So there were not many things that they could indeed learn, or a person with a traumatic brain injury to the portion of their brain that controls their executive functioning, their ability to plan, organize, control, and direct behaviors. So when you're answering your questions, you're not going to know all that by the second lecture or the 100th module. But that's some of the stuff that's out there that's important for you to realize. Sometimes the learning is very, very minute. And as an interesting aside, things that I want to share to you from the field, I can't tell you how many parents I've had to have the same conversation with and thank me afterwards because they keep thinking that the child that they have with a disability, a profound one, or a very, very, very involved condition, is like the little choo-choo train, where I think I can, I think I can, I know I can, I know I can. It doesn't work that way in the real world. You and I may be able to do that to lose some weight or to change a method of thinking, or a person with a disability can overcome many things, to be sure. But some things are challenges that are a bridge too far for people. And that's when we have to back off and be critical thinkers and realize that there are some people who can't learn certain things. There are certain people who are not going to be developmentally equal to other people. Okay? So I want you to get that, and again, when you're doing your questions, if the topic is who can learn, punch in learning and do learning theory and do some searches, or learning with the disabled. If it's barriers, put barriers to the disabled and see what you come up with, and have some sources. And when we're doing our writing, remember, you have to quote some sources. And just don't quote the article or reference the article without using some quotations or making a reference to it in terms, I don't have to go back there and read that whole thing to find out what you were saying. Make a quote and say, in this article, the author says blah, 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 and name the article. Well, I hope this helps, and I'll post more of these on YouTube and then send them out to you via the email. And if you like them, fine. If you don't like them, that's fine too. But these have been my experiences in working in the field. And I have run clinics and worked in institutions and, every setting that you can think of in the school system. That isn't being boastful, it's just being realistic. Now, does that make me an expert in everything? Absolutely not. But part of my job is to share those experiences with you and for you to check them out. Okay? It's a pleasure seeing you writing. I'm very pleased with what you're doing, and I'll be back in touch with you shortly. Okay? All right. You have a nice evening. Happy Valentine's Day.